All right, guys, on this segment, we're going to be talking about when should I hire employees or contractors? When should you start hiring employees or contractors? I would say that it's probably better to do this sooner than it is later, but we're going to get into the details here and some other things to consider because we got to cover the decision point between doing it all yourself versus strategically building a team. It's hard. And when you don't know what's going on, it's even harder, right? It's not like you can just phone a friend and say, hey, what do you think about this? Especially if they've never done it. Some businesses are easy and they're cookie cutter. You can easily see what the McDonald's is doing down the street. They got the SOPs written centuries ago. Okay, maybe not that many, but decades or whatever the case may be. You got a plumbing company. They're gonna have certain SOPs you can find out and you can elicit information from them. Go talk to other business owners and find out. But let's say you're doing a new business. You just don't know. Well, the thing is we wanna talk about when, who, and how to hire and when to accelerate and not burden your business. Because if you hire the wrong person, that's almost worse than not having somebody at all. Why? Because now you're paying somebody, the money's coming out of the business and they're doing it wrong, probably at your direction, and ultimately you're wasting money versus you do it all yourself. I mean, it's really like the cart before the horse, chicken before the egg. They're just as bad either way. So you wanna make sure you get this down. Now, warning signs that it's time to hire somebody. When you have a business and you're offloading different tasks to certain people, you want to make sure the tasks are delegated appropriately. You want to make sure the person that you hired on has a specific defined role. I talked about this in our last series segments ago in getting the right person, getting the right information out in front of the person so that when they apply, they understand what your culture is. They understand what your mentality is when you're going to be hiring. They understand what your rules are with the company, what your culture is with the company, because the culture really defines the business and whether people are going to want to work there, and even more so, whether people are going to want to stay there for a period of time. And the first couple of hires that you have really define the culture of your business. Just go look at any other company. Right? Any big company, they have their own culture of employees. Obviously, industries have their own sets of culture. Medical is going to be different than engineering, than architecture, than construction. But within that, the way they run their business, the attitudes, the mentalities of the people there, the outlook on things, all of that and more defines their culture. And so you want to have a good culture in your business. Now, ultimately with your business, the problem is this. You don't know what you don't know. You can bring a consultant in, but their objective is to make money and help your business secondary, right? So keep that in mind. It's the same thing with real estate. You bring in somebody that's gonna help you manage your real estate. Their objective is to make money first. Yeah, they're gonna help you manage your real estate second. But at the end of the day, they gotta take care of their business first, just like you have to take care of your business first. So your decisions are going to be based on you. And you can't blame those on anybody else. Don't play the blame game. Take ownership of it early on. Hire the right people. Hire slow, fire fast. You should be seeing 100 applicants and maybe picking 2 or 3 if you have a very important role. There's other companies like Culture Index that you can pay them to do personality-based like testing, if you will, on hires that come in. And if they fit your company culture, then you get to bring them in an interview. If not, then they're not even going to come in for an interview. So there's methods to do this, but that's later on. Those services cost money, $10,000 or more. And so you wanna make sure that you get the right people early on. Are you gonna go after friends and family? Probably. Make sure you set defined roles. I would advise against it. I've done that before many times. Very few times it's ended in a positive note with probably 2 people out of all of them. However, what I like doing up front is having a prenup. We call it a prenup, or I forget exactly what the title of the document it is, but I'll drop it in one of the descriptions here, or it'll be in our group actually. And I'll probably do a video just on that, most likely. And what it is it's talking about who the person is, how much time they're going to invest, what they're going to be putting in with the company, if they have any traits or characteristics or things in their own business, are they going to be putting that in with the company? Are they charging? Are they doing it pro bono? What is all of this situation so you understand it better? Now, this is normally for business partners. However, early on, you may have a partner, so this would benefit you. If not, and you're just hiring somebody, you're the boss, you don't need this. You just need a good, solid subject matter. I'm drawing a blank on the thing here. Anyways, you need to have a post. It's a post, right? I'm thinking of something else. You need to have a good post, and ultimately that post has to go out and you talk about your culture, you talk about your expectations, you talk about what will be accepted, what won't be accepted, what the relevant experience is, job post. I don't know why something so simple I couldn't think of that. I was thinking of something totally different on the partnership side. But regardless, this is what you should have here. Now, if you're overwhelmed in your business, right? Warning signs that are going to tell you that it's time to hire somebody. You know, you're the one that's bottlenecking the growth. Everybody's consistently waiting on you. You're consistently overwhelmed. You feel like you can't keep your head above water, right? Revenue is flat because you're stretched out too thin. These are things that are going to indicate, hey, there's a problem with the business. Really, it's a problem with you because you need to define a new role and you need to hire somebody into that. Maybe it's just an assistant right up front. Maybe that assistant turns into a lead, turns into a manager, turns into somebody else down the road. Don't future fake these and tell people what they're going to do. I've made that mistake in the past. Bring people in, have them work a defined role, and then move them up and give them more responsibilities as they prove themselves. Don't promise them the future. Don't promise them certain titles. You know, there's companies like Enterprise that are bad for this. They give people titles, they don't pay them. I don't take my word for this, but this was years ago, and I heard this from people that they're giving them these titles, but they're not getting paid for them. It's what this does is this leads, the future has to equal the present. If there's a disconnect there between what you're saying and what's actually perceived by your employees, or from what the employees are being promised from you or the company, and then the length of time it takes to make that come true, there's gonna be a disconnect. People want now, and that's gonna equal bad in the business. So very loose language here, but at the end of the day, don't promise things that you can't deliver on and keep things factual, right? Show some emotion, but you are the boss. So ultimately, the first hires are going to be, they're gonna free your position, right? They're gonna free your time as the founder, as the business owner, as the CEO, whatever title you gave yourself. The first couple of hires are essentially freeing your time. Admin work, customer service, marketing, implementation. And that's why I said early on, make sure that you understand the marketing. Make sure you get a VA. Make sure you have people that can handle these things, and you don't have to hire somebody at 25 an hour with benefits and workers' comp and insurance, where really out the door it's 38 an hour just to answer phones and do admin work and stuff. A lot of this is online. We have a program that teaches you exactly where to find these people and how to have a backline for your entire business to pay by the hour, sometimes even less than that, 6 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the case may be. And they're a lot cheaper and a lot more qualified. And you don't have to do workers' comp. You don't have to do insurance, none of that stuff. Some of them are in the US, some of them are not. And you could be getting the same thing instead of 28 an hour, 35 an hour on the books with insurance and everything. You could be getting it for 5 or 10 an hour, right? Flat rate. So if you want more information, we'll have a link to that below. But ultimately, what's the difference here between employees, contractors, and freelancers? Depending on the state that you're in and depending on the country, they're gonna look at these different. I can tell you first and foremost, with being in California for many years in business and a lot of other states, California is one of the strictest, but they have a very defined definition of contractors versus employees versus freelancers. All right, freelancers, typically you'll use a program online that facilitates this and they're getting paid and you're paying that program, right? So you pay the program, they're gonna pay the freelancer, and there's a level of separation, very simplistic form here, right? And you got the things like Fiverr, the Upwork, peopleperhour.com, all this stuff, right? Jobs in the Philippines, things like that. Now, those are freelancers or virtual assistants. It's hard to find good ones on there. That's why we put the program together so that we can bring that to you, even people in the US, right? There's a level of separation. Now, employees are actually employed by you. They're an integral part of the business versus contractors, which are maybe needed for a specific project, or they do an ancillary job that ultimately they have to go to, and they're not a defined part of the entire business, but they're temporary. That would be a contractor. Now, there's language here that can be interpreted different ways. Obviously, seek an attorney for this, but I will tell you this. It comes down to this in California and most other states. If you're telling somebody when to be on the job site, if you're giving them a uniform, if you're telling them how to do the work and how to get the job done, if you're providing the tools, if you're providing the equipment, if you're having project oversight on this, typically those are the main items that are going to define whether they are an employee or whether they are a contractor by law, not by what you claim. And I know this because I've had EDD problems, not EDD, Employment Development Division in California, where I had people that I said were contractors. They weren't. defined by their terms. They were employees. I told them when they come in to get their task. They had a certain uniform to wear, equipment was provided. So there's like 20 things that California looks at that you answer these questions and it defines whether they are an employee or not. They're going to default to employee. Why? Because yes, it's a money-making situation, but there's also protections in it as well. The money making on the state side is the workers' comp, the insurances, all the taxes that are going to be taken out, all of that. Whereas a contractor, they're responsible for that. 1099 is what they call it. So W-2 is employee, 1099 contractor. W-9 is completely different. That's if you're buying something over a certain amount, you give somebody your W-9, which is a tax form that says, here's my EIN number. Don't get those confused. So ultimately, what you're gonna have is contractors, employees, and freelancers. Contractors are great because you don't normally have to pay. There is workers' comp in certain states. Nevada makes you pay workers' comp on certain contractors and how you have your business set up. But I've had contractors come in on certain parts of the business, right? They weren't employees, they were contractors that came in. I still paid taxes to them in a certain aspect. There was certain ways that we set this up for a specific project, but ultimately that was that. Because other than that, all my employees are in the ethers around the world in other states, which I should re-say that and reclassify that. They're not employees, they're contractors or freelancers. So they're everywhere else. So I don't have to pay workers' comp. I don't have to pay insurance because I pay them for work that they submit and they're done. I don't tell them how to do it. I just tell them what the project guidelines are and that's it. But more importantly, they reside in another state or they reside in another country. They're not in the same state. So it gets a little bit tricky. You're definitely gonna wanna find out more information either from our program, our group, or an attorney on that because you wanna make sure you're on the up and up, right? Now, just because you're busy, it doesn't mean that you have to hire, right? You wanna make sure you're busy doing the right things. You wanna build a hiring plan. You wanna define the job. You wanna define the success in the role. Like I said early on, if you can have these things better understood up front on communication, when you bring somebody on, it looks more like you have your ish together, but ultimately there's no discussion down the road on, okay, we didn't cover this, what about this, what about that? Be more inclusive. It's the same thing with an agreement with somebody. It's the same thing when you're being open with somebody. It's the same thing like this when you want somebody to do something and you want to put it in writing so it's black and white like a contract or an agreement. Same thing with employment. Be upfront with people, have everything written down. Here's what they can do to get to the next role. Here's what's going to be reviewed in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever the case may be. And ultimately you'll be better received by them. You'll communicate this better to them and you'll be more professional as well. Now, budgeting for hiring. How much can you afford to sustain this position? Don't overpay somebody, but you don't want to underpay because the quality of work could determine the quality of the pay the person's receiving. If they're disgruntled up front and they're not getting paid enough, they're going to be disgruntled. They're going to tell you, maybe they won't tell you at all, but it's going to reflect in their work. And ultimately that's going to hurt the business. You don't want to overpay somebody. So you want to be fair. You need to look at what the job is. That's why you have to define the role. You have to define the responsibilities and you have to define the job and look what the national average is for that. What's the average in your state, in your area? And then what are you going to do with the pay? Under, over, are you including overtime? Are you not? Are you gonna, how many days are you gonna include off? Things like this. What's the benefits package they're gonna get? Are you including insurance? Are you not including insurance? All of these should be discussed up front and there's consultants that help with this. We talk about that in our course, one of our programs on virtual scaling as well. So onboarding and training is critical and the consultants will help with that as well. So like I said, you gotta hire slow, fire fast. A wrong hire is more expensive than not the hire at all, like I talked about at the beginning of the video. Make sure you have this right. If you have questions, put those below. We'll get you some information. We have our guys that are online that will be able to help you out with this as well. On the next video, we're gonna be talking about how do I create and document systems for scaling. See you there.